Yeah, well, in the previous brief video, I explained what kind of economic mechanisms lead to capital innovation, and that is through firms' investment through their earnings, which is retained earnings, which could have been profits or which could have been wealth to improve technologies that would be referred to as capital formation, or that can be referred to as increased capital productivity. And it is done through the processes of innovation which can bring automation and better technologies of producing the same good. But economic process also refers to as economies of scale, and that needs to be understood through consumer markets. If you have a strong and robust consumer base, then of course uh, firms are encouraged to find new technologies to have larger economies of scale, which means that they can be serving a larger consumer base, and that is also one of the reasons for rapid globalization, for which we have seen since the new millennium. But that's an economic process which refers to welfare economics as well. How to increase consumer base. For example, each country has a consumer base. Developed countries have a large consumer base, whereas developing countries have a limited consumer base. Countries like China and India that have been following very high and sustainable economic growth rates, most of the population has moved from poor households to being middle class. And if you represent main characteristic of the middle class is that they would start consuming the technology products as well. And that is one of the reasons that many of the technology firms have invested and have uh, their uh, their factories in China and India, and therefore it would not only facilitate the consumers locally, but it would increase the productivity of capital formation in the countries where these outsourcings have taken place. Definitely, as explained previously, the productivity of capital that is being represented in Indian and Chinese economy have gone through the processes of learning by doing, where most of the learning by doing has been happening through training activities or through labor participation, skilled labor participation in capital intensive production activities. And thereby, many of our smaller businesses will mushroom. Local businesses will add to the economic activity, and there would be smaller firms. There are multinationals like Apple and Samsung or Tesla, but there will be smaller firms which represent local entrepreneurs. And these smaller firms, with time, would then have greater economies of scale once they have achieved quality, once they can compete with larger firms, and therefore local technology firms of China and India would have a regional or international footprint. Now, this is a simple story, and uh, technology firms are continuously working in creating better technologies, more efficient technologies to produce